This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Thursday, April 21st, and I'm here with Sherman Chaddlesone and Allie Chaddlesone in Anadarko, Oklahoma. Sherman, you're a painter and sculptor, and you've been a key figure in Oklahoma Indian art for a long time. I was fortunate to interview you in the 80s, and it's really nice to check back in with you and catch up on your work and career. You're a Kiowa tribal member. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Lawton at the time it was called the Kiowa Indian Hospital in Lawton, Oklahoma. And from there I spent most of my time out in the Wichita Mountains areas, around Saddle Mountain, a little community called Sedan for most of my younger years. And then when I was about 5 years old, we moved to Lawton.
What did your folks do for a living?
My father, at the time that we had moved from my original residence area, my father obtained a job with the civil service at Fort Sill, and he did that the rest of his life as a commercial illustrator. And then my mother, she never had she had a few jobs. She mostly did a lot of sewing, so she had a few full-time jobs doing that, but most of the time she did it at home on her own.
So you were used to seeing your dad's kind of artwork around too?
Yeah.
Any other extended family members whose artwork you remember?
I remember really early, my uncle, my father's brother, Kenneth Chaddlesone, he painted quite a bit. He didn't do it commercially, to exhibit in galleries or to as a revenue income or anything like that. But he would finish a painting, just give it away to a family member, and I have one of his original pieces. But that was my first exposure, family members.
What are your first memories of doing art yourself? As early back as you can remember.
Drawing figures in the dirt with a stick.
That's pretty common among artists. How about at school? First of all, were you in public school there at Lawton then?
Yeah.
Did they have art classes, and did you get encouraged by your teachers much? Or?
Well, not when I first started in the elementary school, but yeah, my first grade teacher had me do silhouettes of my classmates, and it was real easy.
Wow.
We just put them up against the backdrop and shone the light on them, and I just traced their outlines, and then we cut them out, and each one of the students paid me $0.25.
Dang.
And that was like $1 million to me at the time.
Your first sales.
Yeah, and that's what got me started.
That's great. Your great-grandmother, I read, had kept a ledger calendar from 1856 to 1934, and I'm wondering how old you were when you kind of became aware of the fact that she had been a record keeper like that.
It was prior to my early teens. Actually, my father was the custodian of that ledger book.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, the family had given it to him to keep, and so that's where I was first exposed to it. He would bring it out occasionally and let me look at it. And, he was very protective of it, and he had it wrapped, specially wrapped and all that, so we didn't get to look at it every day or when we wanted to. And just when he felt like showing us something. So.
Do you think maybe that influenced your interest in history or art a little bit?
In both.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
Do you know where it is now?
It's at the Fort Sill Museum. One of my aunts gave me a copy of. She had a copy of it. It might be the only actually the only known copy of that ledger. Done in the old school, I can't remember what they call those. Mimeograph copier.
Oh.
And it's a really bad copy, but I took it. I was home visiting from Washington State at one time, and she handed it to me, and I guess she wanted to give it to me. But instead I took it back with me to Washington, and then I made copies of that up there, and I brought that back to her. But it's sitting right there on the table, the copy that I have. So I refer to it quite a bit.
Neat. So how, were you in high school when you went to the Institute of American Indian Art? How did you hear about it first?
I think I just barely heard about it when it first opened. And of course, back to the public school art, really in the junior high was when we started getting art classes offered. And that's when I got more involved in it, formal training. The one thing I did during that time in junior high in Lawton is they had a school-wide competition with all the schools at Lawton. And so I did I think that's when ivory soap first came out with the large bars of soap, and so I got one of those and I carved a horse head out of it. And I won first place on the school-wide competition with it.
Wow.
And then I came home from school one day I was looking for it, I couldn't find it, and I found my younger brother in the bathtub with that sculpture.
Oh my gosh.
But that was my first exposure to formalized art training.
So it sounds like you kind of had a pretty good base before you went to the Institute.
Yeah, and when it first opened, I sort of took notice of it, and I didn't really consider it because to me that was like on the other side of the world. Mm-hmm. The only Indian people I knew were Kiowas, Apaches, and Comanches. I knew there were others out there, but I just wasn't that familiar with them. But Rita Coffey, she's a Comanche. I had gone to public school with her all the time in Lawton. We were in the same grade, same age, and she went out there first, the year 63, I believe. And she came back, and that's all I heard all summer. You have to go, Sam, you have to go, you have to go. So apparently, I guess my father, she even had an audience with my father about that. And then, so school had already started out there in '64 in the fall, and he approached one of his friends who was a state senator and got him to push those people out there to accept me that year, that semester. So when we got the word to go, they loaded me up and drove me out there real fast. That was a shock.
So was it your folks actually who drove you out, or?
Yeah.
That's great. So what were your first impressions when you first got there?
I was wondering with all the mud houses how they were going to stand up in the rain.
Culture shock.
Yes.
Total culture shock. And,
really different landscape.
And everything was still,
culture.
at that time, most of the structures there were still real adobe.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's how different it was at that time. Of course, now everything looks adobe, but it ain't. That was the first shocking exposure. Was just the visuals there, the mountains and all that. And then the next was all the different tribal people. I knew of, beyond the 3 tribes I spoke of, I knew there were Cheyennes and Cherokees and all that here in Oklahoma. And then all of a sudden these Washington people pop up.
They're all out at the end.
Yeah, these others from Great Lakes areas and all that I never knew about, And so that was my second shock there.
So that was kind of a mini education in itself at the school. What kinds of classes did you take there?
Well, all of the required courses, the standard high school. But I started out in a course in painting and graphic, it's called graphic design and printmaking.
And
Basically
you
those three.
took painting classes from both Ellen Hauser and Fitzscholder.
Yeah.
So, what did you get out of Ellen Hauser's painting classes?
Nothing. We were myself, T.C. Cannon, Parker Boyle. Of course, there were others. Spencer too, actually, who's from around here, is Kiowa. We were in his class. I was thinking at the time we were from the Oklahoma School of Art, and so they put us in Hauser. He was teaching mostly traditional type art, tribal art. And so they thought we were going to all sit down and do blue baby gear, you know. We did, and we started doing all this abstract stuff and all that. So Hauser, you know, that was a surprise to him. The first time he'd seen any Indian people do anything like that. And so he threw us over into Shoulders class.
Into Fitzscholder's class.
Yeah.
Was that a more a better environment then to?
Well, Shoulder, of course, you know, he was doing his striped landscapes and butterflies and stuff like that. He was doing a lot of abstraction, his personal art. Then he had a couple of other artists from the north who were doing more contemporary things, and that's why they moved us over with them. And from there, we were able to just, you know, do whatever we wanted.
Now, had you? Cannon had been out there for about a year before you, is that
No,
right?
we went at the same
You went
time.
at the same time,
Yeah.
okay. And had you known Cannon and Parker prior to going there, or?
I knew T.C. better than Parker. I'd seen Parker around, but T.C. and I were nodding acquaintances. We were hung out in different circles, so circles would occasionally overlap, and you know, that's how we knew one another. But our friendship grew out there in Santa Fe.
Did you guys sort of give each other feedback or encourage each other?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. And you met your wife, Allie, at the Institute, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember, how did you get her attention? Or how did she get your attention?
She was chasing me.
Well, we'll hear from Allie later about the truth of that.
She ran me down.
Did you guys have a class together at all, or not?
No.
You did go to Vietnam, I guess, pretty soon, right out of the Institute, is that right?
About, it was about probably 6 months.
6 months. Did you enlist, or were you drafted?
I volunteered for the draft.
And I know that I heard from Richard Whitman that when Cannon was in Vietnam, he would often write back to the school. I found that really interesting, and he emphasized in his letters that, you know, it was not a romantic adventure. It was a really tough thing to be going through. And you've shared in interviews that you had, it was hard initially being creative right after the war. How did you work through that? Was it like a process, just kind of reclaiming your art?
Yeah, and I think I didn't really start painting again until I went up and was living and working on Allie's Reservation. And then all of that exposure to cultural, tribal, traditional culture, you know, they all came back and gradually.
Gradually.
Yeah, and
But you had been in San Francisco too, right?
Yeah.
Did you, directing an Indian art workshop. Can you talk a little bit about what the workshop, its purpose was, and what you did as director?
it was administered by the San Francisco Art Commission, and they had several similar workshops in the Spanish community, the black community, Oriental community, and then of course the Indian, in the white community. And so we had ours there at the what they call the Indian Center, San Francisco Indian Center. And actually we had rented a storefront from the Indian Center, set up in there, and we did painting and drawing classes there, design classes. And,
So you taught most of the
Yeah.
classes, yeah.
no, I didn't. We had several people.
Oh, you had several people,
Yeah.
okay. And it was kind of a exciting time for Indian activism during that time. Was Allie there with you then?
Yeah.
Were you both in San Francisco at the same time? Cool. So did that impact, you weren't, I guess, painting yet, but did that kind of filter into your sensibility a little bit while you were there?
I did a little bit of painting there, not a lot, not enough to do a one-man show or anything, but the first day we left from Lawton, we drove for a couple of days. We stopped one night in Needles, California.
We spent the night with TC and Barb that one.
Yeah. Yeah, the first night we spent with them on our way out. But we eventually got to Needles, California, and spent the night there. We figured the next day we'd get into the Bay Area. And we got up early in the morning and got on the road, turned on the radio, and there was a news flash that the Indians had occupied Alcatraz.
Wow. A great time to be going out.
Yeah.
Step on it.
Yeah, really.
So we just kind of went right into that thing. And as a matter of fact, we worked with them quite a bit.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Providing some little bit of support,
Oh, yeah.
materials.
All kinds of support.
I read that you attended Central State University in Edmond for a while. That was after you had gone up and worked for the Kalispell tribe. Is that right? Or
No, that was prior.
that was prior.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you add anything to your art knowledge during those classes at OCU?
No.
Were those helpful?
No.
Okay. Were you doing Indian subject matter there? And
Yeah.
was there any encouragement for you?
TC was there. He went there on the GI Bill.
Mm.
And our tours sort of overlapped over there. He came back before I did. And then
Okay.
he went into UCO. And I was out still moving around a little bit after I was discharged and came back to Oklahoma, and he talked me into enrolling up there on the GI Bill. So I did. And that's how I got up there. But I had already learned so much in Santa Fe and IAIA that I felt I couldn't gain anything there,
Mm-hmm.
except maybe a degree or stay there all the way through. But I don't know, I was just too restless, I guess. I didn't want to sit there for 4 years and twiddle my thumbs.
Right. So you went ahead, the two of you went to up to Kalispell Reservation, and you were doing a little bit of painting while you were working for the tribe and absorbing some different artistic influences too.
Oh, yeah.
What kinds of things were making an impression on you?
The owl dance.
Oh, okay.
Things of that nature, and it's very similar to their culture. A lot of their stuff was similar to the Kiowa culture, and it wasn't like going into a foreign country or anything like that,
They loved him there.
So I felt like I was able to fit in, real easy there, and picked up a lot of. I even studied some of the coastal art.
Wow.
And to me, it was like Chinese when I first saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking at it and why do they do this and that? And it all started dawning on me, why. Whales and ravens and all that are shaped a particular way, salmon and stuff, you know, then I was able to pick them out eventually. And I even did some prints in the Haida style of their art.
Wow. Woodblock prints or?
Pardon?
Woodblock prints?
No,
or?
they were silkscreen.
Silkscreens, okay.
On textile.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there was a lady from Alaska that came down to Spokane. She used to come down and purchase my art because she couldn't get any of the artists up there to do that type of work for her.
So after about a year or so, you came back to Oklahoma then?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, we were up there for almost 10 years.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know,
We
because
did a lot of
that
stuff.
was it. Yeah, you really had. And then were any of your kids born up there?
Two of them.
Okay, yeah. So really
And one
strong
was born in California,
connections up there. Okay,
San Francisco.
the oldest in California. Mm-hmm. I understand that. What did prompt that move back to Oklahoma after that time? Art.
I began, that's when I started painting again up there. There was a show at the Smithsonian that was coming up. I can't remember the title of it. It was a group show. And I decided to try to put something in there. Get one of my works in there, and they did accept me for that. And following that show, it moved to a gallery there in Washington, D.C. And then just after that, the Southern Plains Museum here contacted me, asked me to do one-man show.
Wow.
And then it just started ballooning like that real fast. And so I told Allie, you know, so that's where all the art market is and everything in the Southwest. I mean, more so than up there.
Right.
For painting, the type of painting I was doing, and so I had all of the experience working with tribal programs, the government up there. I told her, so let's go back and try this for a while. If it doesn't work, then we've always got this to move back into. And so that's basically why we moved back down here.
Now, I guess around 1978, you and T.C. Cannon were planning a two-man show. Is that right?
Yeah, but it didn't get very far. Of course, you know, that's the year that he died.
Right. Was it going to be, where was the show going to happen?
We didn't.
You hadn't, you were
We
just.
didn't get that far.
I see, yeah. But I did read that you, instead of continuing with that two-person show, you sort of organized a retrospective show for.
No, I didn't. I
T.C.
thought of it. I thought of trying a retrospect, but that didn't happen either.
Yeah. But that had to be really hard.
Oh yes.
You guys were so close.
He was he did a large painting. I think it's 8 feet high by 20 feet wide, something like that. It's more of a mural type image, and it's at the Daybreak Star Center, their museum in Seattle. They purchased it, and we went out there to look at it, and they put it up on the wall, and now it just covers a whole huge wall up there.
Cool.
And he'd never seen it completed. He saw portions of it. His studio was so small in Santa Fe, he couldn't stretch it out all the way. So I guess he had it all up here in his head, and as he worked on it, he started on one end of the canvas, and he would roll it like that until he got to the end, the final scene, and so he just wrapped it up then and shipped it up there. So he's always threatening to come up there and look at it, see the whole thing at once. And he called me about a couple of weeks before he died, and he was planning on coming up there to look at it, and he said he'd come over and spend a few days with us. One of the things he was hoping to do also while he was with us is do some white water rafting, of all things.
Oh man.
So we were waiting for that to happen, and then all of a sudden we got the phone call that he was killed in a car wreck.
Mm-hmm. Big loss.
And Parker even got to come to stay with us for a while too, and there went berry picking.
Parker Boyettle. Oh, great, great. Well, you were kind of, sounds like you were really pretty busy, as you say, with your painting career. And when Allie, you know, decided she was going to start doing sculpture full time. And I'm wondering if you remember when she first told you she was ready to get after it full time.
Well, she was dabbling in ceramics for quite a while, ceramic sculpture. And I sort of remember her, you know, leaning towards the stone. I can't remember what her inspiration was. But we do have a lot of the stone here in the area, you know, that she knew was available. So I think there's another impetus for her to do that, to try it.
Did you guys both start doing booth shows that had both paintings and sculpture?
Yeah.
Pretty soon after that? What were some of the early shows that you did together with both medium?
Red Earth.
Media. Red Earth. Was Anadarko Indian Fair ever a factor showing over there?
No, not really. We did show there. There's one of my ribbons right there.
Later, not
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not when we were starting.
Yeah.
Starting into it full time.
Right. You showed with Doris Littrell for many years as a painter before you started sculpting yourself. And, you know, it's just amazing, the group of you, when I think of Merrick and Parker and T.C. Cannon and you, because you're all such a force as painters. And you've mentioned your friendship with Parker a little bit, and the fact that you, he was at the Institute when you were. What about Merrick Creeping Bear? How did you guys become friends?
I think we were babies.
Wow, you knew him. You knew him that long. Are you related?
Yeah.
At all? Are you? You are. Okay. Okay. Wow. He mentioned several times that, you know, and he didn't get that opportunity to go to the Institute, I guess, but, you know, that you were so important in terms of giving him emotional support and artistic support.
Yeah, we grew up together around here, and I've known him all my life.
So did you kind of stay on him too about getting his work out there?
Oh, yeah. Cracking the whip.
Crack that whip. How would you describe the Oklahoma Indian art scene, the way it changed maybe from the 70s to the 80s? And I realize you were gone for chunks of time too, but just coming back and kind of reassessing some of the changes.
It didn't change a whole lot, not very fast. They were still doing Bambi Deer when I came back.
Okay.
Moved back around, you know, and that took a while. The influence from the Art Institute didn't reach here fully yet.
Right.
But it was going full blast out there. And I remember the first year that I went to school, out there we had entered the annual, I can't remember the name of it's a large show, they still do it. It's an annual competition.
Was
in
it
Arizona.
Scottsdale?
Yeah,
Scottsdale annual?
Scottsdale, and we won a lot of the categories in that show with all this new imagery that we were doing.
Wow.
And we caught a lot of flack from all of the dealers and all the so-called art experts that were knew everything about Indian art, and they couldn't understand what that was, what we were doing, you know.
So when you say we, you're talking about Oklahoma painters and
Not necessarily.
TC, or who are you talking about?
The whole group of us there, like I say, there were some from up north who
Okay.
were doing it.
Oh, but maybe coming out of the Institute.
Yeah.
I got you.
All of the Art Institute students from there, and
Yeah.
it was such a shock to all of them, I guess. And,
Kind of had to bring them along. Huh?
yeah. They didn't have anything like that hanging on the gallery walls and all that, and I think that's what a lot of the outcry was about. But that took a while, you know, to infiltrate over here to Oklahoma.
Now, were you Your early style, how would you describe when you were sort of, I guess after being at Kalispell, what kinds of things were you painting and how would you describe your style?
A lot of it was like that painting there.
Yeah,
A lot
and
of
we'll
traditional cultural
take
things.
a picture of
Yeah.
that, but with very bright colors and
Mhm.
kind of expressionistic. And pretty big, you like the larger format as opposed to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easier and faster.
And then you and Parker and Merritt got the commission to do the Kiowa Museum murals. How did you decide which portions of the project you guys were going to tackle? Did you, like, who was going to do what portion of Kiowa history, or did you each want to cover the same time period, or do you remember how that...
It was such an involved process. We had a general idea, a general outline. Of course, the concept was to do tribal history from as far back as we knew up to today. We were limited in space to 10 panels. We could have done 40 more panels and still not touched all of it, you know. But we got to a point to where we had to bring in a lot of elders and sit and do like listening sessions with them. And they handed us all of these stories, tribal history. We had several sit-down sessions with them like that. And they basically ended up refining the outline for us. And so we were able to divide it into three main portions: prehistory, early history, and then contemporary. Like that, but we had to leave out a lot that we wanted to cover. What we did was just the highlights of our tribal history.
Mm-hmm.
And
none of you really saw what everything was going to look like side by side till the opening, did you? Was that the first time you all saw your work together?
no, we had a studio here. We all worked
Oh,
together.
okay. So you kept tabs on each
Mhm.
other throughout the process. That's neat. Have you taught any workshops in art and painting, or?
Probably the only thing I did was I taught some stone sculpture over here at the Southern Plains Museum.
Okay.
I did that for a week.
Uh-huh. Was it an intensive kind of week-long
Yeah.
workshop with...
I just
You-
showed the basic tools and how they work, and all the way to polishing and all that.
Cool.
So
Was that in the 90s? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the Oklahoma art scene changed, Indian art scene changed from the 80s to the 90s?
from the 80s to the 90s, it didn't change very much. So one thing about Oklahoma, you don't get a lot of movement. We produce a lot of artists, but for some reason they don't move into other areas, other regions, you know, to study and all that. They just do what's here at home, and so there's not that mixture.
But I was going to say, I think you all had made a real impact, though, in terms of what the public was. You had brought the public along with these different approaches to art, these newer styles, and they were well established by then.
Mm-hmm.
People were not asking for the quote unquote, you know, traditional or two-dimensional kinds of work. They liked the other paintings and they were buying them. So that might have been one change. But in general, you're saying Oklahoma Indian artists tend to kind of be sort of regional or in their interests.
Right. Yeah.
And one change was the 1990s Indian Arts and Crafts Act. So I'm wondering if you remember how that impacted the galleries and artists at the time.
I think that took a long time for it to soak in. And there's still, I know there's still issues with that going on, and some of the galleries are still advertising Indian artists who are not enrolled or even recognized. Things of that nature, you know, and profiting off of that. That's still happening today. To me, the Indian, the true Indian artists they don't worry about it, and you know they need to be, because there's other people shoving them out of the way, you know, making money where they could be doing that.
So it hasn't really been as effective, you don't think, is it?
Not here, no. It works pretty well out in the Southwest with the jewelers, the rug weavers, and them. A lot of that stuff is easily reproduced. China, Mexico, wherever. But you know, the type of maybe that has something to do with it. You know, doing original art, and they can attach a signature to it, say like a canvas. And but I know it's impacted the Southwest a lot more than here.
You spent several years working for the Kiowa tribe. Did you bring anything away from that that's kind of going to be feeding into your artwork now?
I think it's going to help me do more art, because it's like you walk away from that and say, don't ever do that again. Learn lessons.
There's other places I want to spend my creative energy.
Yeah.
You paint mainly with acrylics, is that right?
Right.
Okay.
I started out in walls, but it was too slow.
Okay, yeah. And you know, you have such an interesting, I think, you know, not only personally your family, but also in tribal terms, you know, kind of claim, I guess, basically on ledger art. And I wonder if you could, first of all, define ledger art for us, and then talk about how your approach to ledger art might be different from other artists.
Ask me that first part.
How would you define ledger art?
How would I define it?
Yeah, as a genre.
To me, I think it's just an extension of earlier art forms like the pictograph on rock art, petroglyphs. A lot of it looks exactly the same. The ledger, the actual ledger didn't happen until the white man came around. Prior to that, they were painting on teepee covers, buffalo hides, deer hides, but it's the same imagery. And what's regarded as ledger art now, it's just a misnomer, really, the ledger. But the art has been around a lot longer than ledgers have for us. And the way that I do it, there's a wide range. I put a lot of contemporary treatments into it, and also I stick with the traditional elements of it. So, you know, I go back and forth. And, I see a lot of it moving nowadays, just like the Bambi art did. It's starting to turn cartoonish, the ledger art is. And it's because the people who are producing it now, they don't have the background. They don't understand that it was originally, mostly for the Kiowas, it was record keeping. And when they painted images on teepees in what we call the ledger style now, they did that as a record of things that happened either to the owner of the teepee or to somebody associated with the owner. They didn't go and, you know, make up things to put on there.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I see it drifting away from that right now. So if it continues, it will become the new bandy art.
Interesting. How important is research to your painting?
If we use the ledger genre, it's very important because most of mine are based on history. Most of the things that I do in the ledger style. But then again, there's that painting there, it's a part of our tribal history, and that's not done in the ledger style. So most of the paintings are, you know, I make sure I know what I'm talking about before I do them.
Are painting titles very important to you?
Yes, I think they should be as expressive as the image.
And how about your signature? Was that a little bit of a trial and error thing to come up with?
Signature, no.
Okay.
It just sort of degenerated over the years. Fell apart.
What is your creative process like from the time you get an idea? Do you take a note about it or do a quick sketch or?
Sometimes I'll do a sketch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the age right now, I'm gonna record everything, so
Get it down
what was
fast.
that now?
Is it different for, and do you do preliminary sketches before you paint?
Not every time, but most of the time, yeah.
Do you have a different creative process for sculpting when you sculpt?
No, mostly the stone. You see an image in the stone, it's there, you know, you just remove the outer portions of it and it comes out.
So you don't ever do any sketching really with your stone sculptures or after
If it's something like a commission or something, we will.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get it on paper somewhere. Somebody has something in mind.
Yeah, a theme or something.
I
like
see.
that.
Right. You'll try some different approaches and then kind of look for the stone that might work for that.
Yeah, we have to do that too, is find the stone that'll fit.
Mm-hmm. Are there any concepts or like treatments that kind of consistently run through your sculpture that would allow us to say, you know, well, this is Sherman's sculpture, not Allie's?
And not Allie's?
Mm-hmm.
I think mine are mostly have been male-oriented subjects,
Mm-hmm.
and the opposite, hers, female.
Mm-hmm.
I did do one partially dressed female at one time, though.
Only once, huh?
Yeah. But that was a commission.
Are you still, for a little while, I think you were doing some patterning inside the stone, kind of engraving or incising a little bit. Do you do that still quite a bit, or does it?
No, I haven't, but we did do that. It was a commission that Allie had. Recently, larger stone, 2 larger stones, we did do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped her with that.
So you helped with some of the incising. Yeah. Have you ever done a painting of something that like spun off an idea for a sculpture, or vice versa?
I can't think of any.
Mm-hmm. They're so different. What's been one of the pivotal moments in your career up to this point? Kind of like a fork in the road sort of moment, I guess.
The Art Institute in Santa Fe.
Okay. That really set you on the direction.
Yeah.
And how about one of the highlights of your career so far?
Tough question. Maybe I'll think of something in the editing.
Okay, okay. Or maybe an award that was especially meaningful to you, or
I have to think
you
back.
might think of it. How about one of the low points?
In the art,
Mm-hmm.
there's been several, mainly in the loss of my friends, Coors TC, Parker, Merrick, Benny Buffalo. There's several others. They all seem to be, they were all such a surprise, you know, the way they happened. It seems like they had a lot more to do yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to add? Any important things that happened that we didn't cover?
No, not personal.
Okay. And well, we're going to take a look at a few of your paintings here.
Yeah, there was no such thing as Canada at that time. And this particular creature was, that our name for that is Zone Kane, which means creature with large teeth and is very fearsome or bad. It appears, the creature appears in several stories, other stories of Satan and Spider Woman and Zayatali stories. The creature appears in those stories, and we know that there's a lot of petroglyphs up there in that area that also portray that that creature up there. That there remain a lot of tribes, the northern tribes. You know, it's in their stories also. Even Allie's tribe, and there's probably the most famous images that we have are one of our teepees has two large paintings of that creature on it. And then there's others like Silverhorn. He did several paintings of that creature in the late 1800s, and also another fellow by the name of Zone Time, while he was a prisoner of war at Fort Marion, Florida. He also did at least one that I know of.
The title of this is?
The title is The Winter They Dragged the Head. It's a the image I expanded on an image that's from one of our tribal ledger keepers. His name was Little Bear. And it's the winter of 1837. I believe, do you have that narrative?
Yes.
But it's an actual event that happened in Texas. And it portrays some group of Kiowas and Comanches entering the one of our camps, dragging the head of an enemy. And the event was recorded by Little Bear, and it was even later confirmed by a fellow named Boyne Ale, which the name describes somebody who's large and light in complexion. And he was a German captive from the Galveston Bay area. He was captured as a young boy. And he lived out the rest of his life with the Kiowas. He was offered repatriation at one time, but he was already married and had his own kids and Kiowa kids, so he became Kiowa, and he just stayed with the tribe until his death. And Parker Boydell is the descendant. the Kiowa pronunciation of the name is Boyle, and it was corrupted later to Boyle.
Boyle. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
But I tried to portray him out here.
Oh.
Silly fellow with blonde hair.
Oh, that's him. Oh, that's neat. There's just wonderful, fine detail, and as you say, all that feeling that you have for the history, the ledger drawings.
And even those events that happened, that the Kiowas were involved in, we didn't start it. The Comanches drug us into it.
Yeah.
Comanches made us do it.
They made you do it.
The title is Owl Dancing North of the Snake.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically set in the northwest region of the United States. And it's a particular dance that the tribes up there do is called the owl dance. Similar to the two-step that happens here in the southern plains. And it's a social dance. It's the only time the men and women touch or even embrace in any ceremonial dancing or social dancing. And then the little winding blue area there, of course, is the Snake River. So that's the reason for the title.
Which is such a pretty river, too. Well, that's a beautiful painting. Well, thank you very much, Sherman, for sharing your time with us.